All right, so I want to welcome Preston Peterson to the Journey podcast. Preston, how you doing?
Doing well, doing well.
Awesome, man. Appreciate you joining us today. And of course, we have Maria here with us, who was probably a little flustered on our last podcast as we had some internet challenges. We had roofers. I think I told you, Preston, with ladders banging up against the building during the middle of the podcast. We made it through. We didn't completely panic. So kudos, Maria.
Hey, speak for yourself.
I think we did take a break and I ran out there. I was like, guys, come on, let's chill out for a second. But hey, man, appreciate you being on the podcast. You and I have kind of spoken, here and there over the last couple of years. And, I see you on a lot of the social media groups in the pest control industry. Saw you at Pest World in Boston this last year. And speaking of, will you be heading over to Hawaii?
I will. I missed you in Dubai for the one in Dubai, but I will be the one in Hawaii as well. So
I missed me at the one in Dubai too.
I know you missed. It was amazing. So
tell us about that real quick. I don't think I could justify that to my wife and family after getting back from all these other trips that we've been going on. But tell us about that.
It was amazing. Well, so Dubai is amazing, and Pest World was great. It was good to meet some other people there. But yeah, Dubai is just incredible. And it's so incredible that I think maybe you lose a little bit of the luster because there's just so much. Everything is just over the top.
Was that your first time there?
It was. Yeah, it was first time in Dubai. We stayed at the Atlantis for a couple days, right on the Palms. And we went out and visited like the Grand Mosque. We went out to the desert, rode some camels, and then just went to all these different buildings, and it was just crazy. Just amazing when you see like what they're able to accomplish out of just a complete desert. And it's like it was amazing. So definitely will be going back. Super safe, super clean. It was awesome. So,
how long of a flight was that from you? And you're in Utah, so from Utah to what did that look like? It's a pretty long flight, right?
Yes, we broke it up a little bit. We went to Paris for 3 days, and then from Paris we went to Dubai for like 6 days. So otherwise it's like a 17-hour flight.
Oh, wow, yeah.
So yeah. So, but it was definitely worth it. Definitely would be. I'll definitely be going back. So.
Well, that's awesome. So hopefully we'll see you in Hawaii then, and I believe Maria may be there with maybe with Ashley or someone else from our team. Maybe setting up something for the podcast. We set up a booth at one of our local associations and had some fun, handing out some swag and stuff like that. And it's really been cool hosting this podcast because it gives us an excuse to reach out and connect with people like yourself, who I personally extremely value. Being new to the industry, July will be 3 years that I've been in this industry. So I'm learning every single day. And the doors that it's opened has been pretty amazing. So let's talk about your journey to where you are today. And I know we could talk about 1,000 different things like most of our guests, because you've been very successful in different areas of being an entrepreneur and marketing and sales and growing a business and all that, and culture. Kind of start from the beginning, give us a background on your journey to where you are now.
Yeah. So how it all started was I was a college kid and I was doing door knocking, selling during the summers. And I served a mission for our church, came back, I was 21, met my wife the very first day of school, college. She was like 19. We got married and went out to go knock doors. And when we got married, neither of us had a car, neither of us had like a phone or a computer or anything. I had $200 my name, and I remember she had a $3,000 loan at 20% interest.
Oh, wow.
For her college. So, and we went and we knocked and we made good money. We made, I think we both worked for that year, and, we made like 40, 50 grand. And so I was like, maybe this is something we can do long-term. Next year I managed for another company and had some success. And then we went back and we sold one more year, and I was like, you know what? Like, I don't mind it. I'm pretty good at this. And so we started our own, had about like 7 grand to start my first company. And it went well. Like, definitely some some trials, and, I don't think I paid myself for the first 2 years of the business. And, we had, my wife ran the office, and I would go knock doors, service the accounts the next morning, go to a gas station, change into shorts, go knock doors the rest of the night. My wife was on bed rest for 10 weeks with our firstborn, and she'd be sitting on a couch with a cell phone and a laptop running the office. And
Wow.
I remember it because it was like, we didn't know any different, right? We're like, dude, we're all in on this. This is all we know. And that was the only thing we had going for us. We ended up selling that company about 2.5 years later. And, we kind of went in that model, because that was kind of like back then, the door-to-door model was like, you build them up, you sell them, you build them up and you sell them. So we did that for, I think I had 3 or 4 pest control companies that we did that with. And then we got to the point where like, hey, what do we want to do? Like, we're making good money, but it wasn't, but I didn't know what else I wanted to do with my life. And I was like, do I want to keep just doing this and flipping companies? And I remember we looked at each other and we're like, you know what? Why don't we make this, like, this needs to be our platform to change people's lives. And so we started another company, and that's when we started Ardent 10 years ago. And our focus was we want to help bring people with us on the journey to have success. Because at that time, a lot of these door-to-door guys could make really good money during the summers, but that was it, right? There was no chance for them to grow and actually have like equity and build into something. And so we started to do that. We started to offer equity to our guys that did really well selling and managing. And we built that company up, and it was amazing. And it was like, but it was more of, this is our platform of helping to change people's lives. And we always joke around that we had 3 technicians that had Ardent tattooed on their body. And it was awesome,
You're all in.
Yeah. And it's like, when the owner's not getting the tattoos and the employees are, it's like, crap, maybe we should do something. But it was amazing. And so that's kind of where we were at. I remember some challenges we had as well. Like, I remember we had a moment, and I think every business has this, right? Where you can look back, and there's about 3 or 4 moments when I look back on the business and I was like, that was not me at all. Like, it was 100% the Lord's hand, like blessing us and taking care of us. And I think that's, for me, I feel like that's how I know if I'm on the right path or not. Having those moments that you think are like the end all be all moments, and your business is going to go under, and all of a sudden some miracle happens and you come out to be stronger on it. And we had one of those moments. It was probably our 2nd or 3rd year with Ardent. We knew we needed to sell one of our branches to be able to pay our back ends to our sales guys. Going into the year, we're like, you know what? Let's just double down and go big. So we recruited a bunch of guys, had a bunch of sales put on that year, but knew we're not going to have the money to pay these guys. So we need to go and sell one of them to pay off the back ends. And then we'll have these other branches that will make a bunch of money on. So we do that. We get an offer lined up. We work with the company for probably 2 to 2.5 months, get an LOI, and we're stoked. Like, the offer was higher than we had ever been given before. 3 days before we're supposed to close on the deal, the company backs out. And this was like end of November, and my back ends are due like January 1st. And so I'm sitting like, we were a couple $100,000 short. And at that time, I wasn't well connected to just go find a couple $100,000 to pay people. And I remember sitting there, and I just was like, I was just so depressed for like a week. And we had some partners that were like, dude, do we want to keep doing this? Like, maybe they want to do something else. And,
right.
And I had like my best friend, my brother was in the business with me, and, everyone's looking for me for the answers. I'm like, I don't know the answers. Like, there's nothing we can do. We knew we were going to have to sell. There's not going to be enough money in the account. Like, what do we do? And we go through and we changed the whole way we operate. We got rid of all of our brick and mortar locations. We had all of our technicians running remotely, and Our office was now remote, changed everything. We ended up making back ends by like 20 grand.
Wow.
But what it did was it allowed us to scale at a way faster pace than we had ever imagined. Because at that time we had 2 offices. We ended up finding another buyer 4 or 5 months later. But we made it through the hard time that we had. And then we opened another office, and then we opened up like an office a year for the next 4 or 5 years. And some years two or more offices. But it made it so our profit margins were like 20% higher.
Wow.
And so it's like, if we didn't have that for that time, we wouldn't have been able to scale at the rate we were scaling, because our initial startup costs were like a fourth of what everybody else was. And we were able to make these businesses profitable within 12 to 18 months.
Wow.
And so I look back at it, I'm like, dude, it was what I thought was like the worst thing in the world. And I thought I was going to lose everything. And here it was, like the biggest blessing in our business. And, from that point on, we were on the Inc. 5000 fastest growing businesses 5 years in a row. This year we'll probably make it again. So it'll be 6 years in a row. But it's like, none of that would have been possible if we had not had that scary moment that we thought was the end of it. And so, it's sometimes your trials are your biggest blessings. You don't realize it until afterwards,
Absolutely. I mean, talk about adversity. And it's funny, not to that scale, but I met with one of our guys with our insurance business this morning, and I was telling the story about how I couldn't make payroll, and I had to go, like, I think beg my parents or something, like, to float me $20,000 for 3 days. And it's like, after that, I'm like, man, is this rock bottom? Is this what I took all this risk to do, right? To be an entrepreneur. And so I can imagine, that times 10 or 15, $20,000 back end payroll. So that's a big nut to crack.
Yeah, it was, but like I said, you look back and you're just like, man, the Lord just blessed us and helped us through it. And there was something we needed to learn that we didn't know about. And
Sure. Yeah.
if I had done it the way that everybody else done, I never would have had to learn that experience. And we went to be where we're at. So
Wow. And so 10 years ago, Ardent, did you co-found Ardent with someone, or was this your baby, or do you have partners in that venture?
yeah, so I have a partner who was with me for all of them, and his name was Aaron. He's my operations guy. And then we had, on some of the offices, we would allow our door-to-door guys, if they were good at recruiting and they could sell, that they could buy into an office and have some equity in it.
Gotcha.
We had since bought all of those guys out, and one of them we rolled up into the top co, and so we have a piece of all of it now. But all those guys have come and gone, and it's been a great learning experience. Some of those relationships better than others, but it was good to kind of learn and just kind of grow from that. So.
Well, that's awesome. And just recently, I know you announced you guys have done a merger. So you've merged with another company, and I want to get into that because I think that's really interesting. But let's talk pre-merger, which was what, in the last 4 or 5 months. At what scale had you grown Ardent, whether it's revenue or employee count, locations? What did that look like prior to the merger?
Yeah, so we had 11 locations. We were doing between 12.5 to 14 $1 million in revenue a year. And it fluctuates a lot in the summers versus fall, winter, employee wise, but we were probably up to 100+ employees.
Sure.
So not counting our 1099 sales guys.
Right. And then, so tell us about the merger and how did that come about? And is this a relationship that had already been established, or tell us the background there? I think it's super interesting.
Yeah, so it is very interesting, because we had these guys who are equity partners, as we call them, that were like our door-to-door guys, and some of them were wanting to get out, and they were just burned out with door-to-door and just wanted to kind of move on, which is perfectly fine. And we have a set agreement of how many years they got to be in for minimums, and they had reached those minimums, so it worked out well. And we kind of looked at the business, and one of the benefits of that was our door-to-door side wasn't real super strong this last year because of guys being burned out and looking to go elsewhere. But it made us focus on other parts of the business to kind of help us strengthen the core of the business, and so we probably did 70% of our revenue was brought in by inspectors or technicians and inside sales last year versus our door-to-door, where that's for door-to-door companies, it's pretty hard to find a balance. I mean, it's hard to get to 50-50, but to have it go the opposite way of,
Sure, yeah.
So that was a huge blessing for us as well. And then we were at the PCT Top 100 ceremony, and we were just talking to guys, and we met the Alta group and these three brothers. And I had never met them before, didn't know anything about them. And we're just talking, and we're like, man, a lot of their locations lined up really well with where our locations were. They were roughly the similar size as we were. And we were real good at like technician and inspector sales, and they were really good at the door-to-door sales. And both of us had a strong inside sales program, just getting easier for capital, because one of the big things for them was they had a lot of door-to-door guys, but they couldn't keep them all in-house. And so they had to kind of market their guys to other companies because of cash flow reasons. And so I had some buddies of mine that are big in the banking industry, and they were like, look, if you guys can get to that 20, 25, 30 million in revenue, it's way easier for you to get cash and lines of credit to really excel the growth of this business. And so we kind of looked at that, and so we talked to them, hey, maybe there's an opportunity here. And it was interesting because when we did an interview for the PCT magazine, first thing they said is like, okay, so who bought who out, or what's going on? And we're like, no one. Like, there's no money exchanged. We literally just merged both companies because we saw the opportunities, and the value of us together is worth more than the value of us separate. And the guy was like, I've covered every merger in pest control for like the last 14 years, and I've never seen something like this before. And he's like, I've heard about mergers, but he's like, there's always somebody that's like stepping down or leaving.
Right.
And that wasn't the case. It was literally, it's just both of us said, what can we accomplish together? And it's 1 + 1 = 3, right? And it's that whole idea. And I look and I'm like, if more businesses, and this is the thing, right? We had talked to some other companies, and they had turned down, like, we don't want to do it. They thought they could get a better valuation or be more valuable by themselves, and which is fine. And it's better because maybe they weren't the right partners for us. But I'm a big believer in partnerships, and I'm a big believer of, if nobody cares who gets the credit, the amount of success that you can have is unlimited. And the problem, especially with, I would say, the pest control industry in general, but service industries in general, is you get a lot of these people that were a technician or were in sales, and they do their own business because they want to be in control, right? Like, they want to have control. They want to be the top guy, and they don't want to have to take orders from anyone. And that's ultimately why there's so, like, in our industry, it's extremely fragmented.
Right.
And we're seeing right now a huge amount of private equity coming into our industry because they see the opportunities. They're looking at this and they're like, this is a huge fragmented industry. We can come in and start buying a couple of these companies, rolling them up, and we can get really big, really quick, and get some amazing valuations. And so, but it's because of the nature of it, right? If everybody was just like, hey, let's see how we make this thing work, and they didn't care about the egos and control, and they could all work together, there could be some amazing things that could happen. And so that's what happened with this. Luckily, the Alta group, great guys, and luckily, same thing, right? Like, they're open-minded and they saw the opportunity. So we merged this year back in like February, and we're planning on growing by more than 100 to 150% this year.
Wow.
So Yeah, I mean, it's going to be, we went from 5 inspectors to right now, I think we have 25 inspectors hired and trained. They've got over 200 reps on the doors that are gonna be out there working.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, so it's gonna blow up, and it's like each of us, we wouldn't have been able to do that by ourselves. We wouldn't to double this year if we didn't have them, and they wouldn't have been able to double if they didn't have us. And so it's just kind of bringing both sides together to say, hey, what can we accomplish if we all work together? So.
Well, I think that's amazing. That's why I find the topic so interesting, because, typically there is, again, kind of the head, group that's taking the majority ownership, or that's, really, you can call it a merger, but they're really buying them out and kind of thing. And of course, it sounds better to a customer base if it's a merger, not an acquisition. And you mentioned ego too, but, from the practical standpoint, you've probably learned over the years too, that it is hard when you have 2 people in charge, right? When you have an EOS world, we call, when 2 people are in charge and no one's in charge, right? Where you've got to have, you can't have 2 chiefs, you got to have the chief. And so that's got to be interesting, number one, to do that at the size that you guys were, right? And then from a leadership standpoint, I know you guys are relatively fresh into this, and I'm sure it'll change and evolve, as you guys grow, but what is some practical advice you would say that could work? Because it seems like that would work less often than it would work. And so you guys have found a way to bring this together, talk through those. It's like the elephant in the room, I'm assuming, when you're first talking, you're having these talks. I think of other companies that I could potentially merge with, smaller companies closer to our size. And I think, well, you've got this owner and they're all in just like we are. How could, not necessarily like ego, but just like they're used to running a certain way. They've built their culture. We've done the same. So when you talk about the elephant in the room and some of that stuff, how have you talked or worked through that?
Yeah, and that's a good point, especially with these guys, because they're all brothers, right? So for them, they've never had to really trust anyone that wasn't part of their family. And trust me, I've had some really good partnerships, and I've had some not so great partnerships. So there's always that thing in the back of your mind of being like, yeah, it makes sense on paper, but is it going to actually work out?
Right, in practicality, right.
And so, and has it been perfect without ever having any like differences of opinions? No, not at all, right? Like there's definitely some things that we've had to learn from them and that they've learned from us. And the biggest thing I would say is you have to understand why you're doing it, right? Like, what is the vision of doing it? And what are you trying to accomplish? And because when you sit down and we look at it, and if there are differences of opinions, we sit there and we say, okay, is this something that it's like, I'm going to die on my hill, if I don't get my way? Or is it that big of a deal that it's like, what, I don't care about it. Like, if you guys think this is best, great, then let's do it, And so that's the biggest thing, is just saying, because like, for example, we took their name on, we took the Alta name. And that was tough, right? Because you sit there and say, hey, we built this company over 10 years. We've got a reputation. Our people are bought in. We have a great culture.
Got tattoos, right?
Yeah, we've got people with tattoos. We got technicians that have tattoos on their body. And it's like, how do we decide, okay, we're willing to give that up, right? And at the end of the day, it's like, okay, well, what's going to be best for the company with the people we're with? And just like, I think like a CEO of a public company where they're like, we got to do what's best for the shareholders. It's the same mentality of we got to do what's best for all of our employees. And so we've got to do what's best for the people that are entrusting us every day on their livelihood. So if my ego is going to get in the way of that and be a hindrance to us having the success that I could give to my employees, then I've got to have a reality check and say, okay, does this really matter for what we're trying to accomplish, right?
Sure.
And so there's a lot of days where you have to look in the mirror and just be like, am I doing what's best for my people? Because if I'm doing what's best for my people, the success will come, right? If I'm doing what's best for me, then a lot of times the success might not come. Because we find when it's all about us or the individual, you're forgetting about the people that got you where you are.
Sure.
And, and that's the problem, is when you get success, sometimes people get big heads and overconfident, and they think it's all because of them. trust me, I wouldn't be where I'm at all if it wasn't for the people we had to help build this thing.
No doubt.
So that's the biggest thing. I just kind of always look back and just say, what decision is going to be best for our employees? And if it's going to be best for our employees, it's probably the best decision for the company.
Sure. So let me ask you this. Let's say you've got two companies, right? You have company A and company B. Company A, and let's say they're similar in size. Company A is, I mean, they're all in, they're wanting to do this for another 10 years, grow. They're in hyper growth mode, right? Company B, they're the same size, but company B is like, you know what? We've grown to where we've gotten to this point. We're happy, we're content. We don't have to go grow. We've kind of reached that good lifestyle size business, right? Can a merger exist under those conditions? Because it seems like in one sense, company B can say, maybe the owner or CEO can kind of say, you know what, kind of burned out a little bit. I've gotten to this point. I see where you guys are going. I want to keep my investment in this company and go that route, compared to two that are just wide open in growth mode. How do you think those two scenarios play out if someone wanted to look for a potential merger with someone in their market?
So I think the biggest thing is, one is clear expectations, right? So because what's the reason for the merger, and in making sure you guys align on the overall vision of what you're trying to accomplish, right? And so like, if you've got someone that's kind of like, hey, we're burned out, we're content, it could still work, but you just got to be like, hey, well, here's where we're taking it, right? Like,
right.
It's a matter of, hey, we want to go, and we think 3 years from now, together we can get to this point, and then we're going to get this much more on evaluation. And so that it's like, hey, if you get an extra 1x on your valuation because you guys are together,
right,
it makes sense. And so then they just have to say, okay, if they're not going to be wanting to put in the work, are they all right with letting the company that does want to do the work to run with it, and that's the biggest thing too, is like just making sure that for me and for all of our owners in the company, to say, making sure we're not holding the company back with some of our opinions or our thoughts, right? And so it's like, there's some things that I'm like, I don't know if I agree with that, but at the end of the day, it's like, if it's not my responsibility, like if it's my ops guy that's doing it, if I really trust my ops guy, then I should let him make the decision to say he knows what's best for that, because that's what he's expert in. And I might be the bottleneck in the process if I'm trying to force something that's not there.
Sure, yeah.
So, but I think that's the biggest thing, is having a clear expectation. And that was what was really good with this merger we did, was we aligned out our vision and what our expectation was and what we were trying to accomplish together before we did the deal. So we were all on the same page and said, okay, here's what we're trying to get to. And it was amazing, like, as things kind of fall in, and you'll kind of see where everybody lines up too. Like, you'll find the ones that are kind of like, I don't know if I want to be in this for the next 5-10 years. And you'll find the ones that are like, dude, we want to blow this thing up and we want to quadruple in size in the next, 3 to 5 years. Right. So, and it's fine to address those people, and they can still bring a vital part to the company, even though maybe they're not going to be there as long. There's still a value they can bring in the short term. It's just making sure you can address it early on and have those conversations so everyone has an expectation of what they're supposed to do.
Let me ask you this from I'm sure you guys had some really good legal counsel on this, and probably walk through all the not only the positive scenarios, but hey, what if this thing doesn't live up to either expectation? Are there some guardrails or some places you can structure this wise to where if it's not working out, I mean, are there buyout, and I'm not saying just yours specifically, but just in general, when you're thinking through this, like a year, 2 years, it just doesn't seem to be working out. Is there a way to unwind that in a way, or is there a way to have that buyout provision or something to where, it still works for both parties? What was your sense kind of talking through some of those scenarios?
Yeah, and it's a good point. We did have some clauses in there that say, if somebody wants to get out before we achieve what we're trying to achieve, what kind of valuation should they be getting? And I think the big thing too is to remember that both of our companies were where we were because of the effort that everyone's been putting in to that point, right? Sure. And so for all of us, we're like, dude, we're going to be generous to every one of the partners that they want to leave. because we wouldn't be where we're at without them, right? And so it's not if somebody wanted to leave early or if some things don't work out, it's, we still are like, we've all put in a lot of work to get here to this point. And that's one thing that's nice about pest control is there's always a buyer. If you had to go sell, you can always go sell your business for something, and most of the time when you're the size as we were, it's like, it's not hard to find a buyer for a one-off branch or whatever, if we needed to buy a partner out at a decent valuation, so they got taken care of and stuff like that. So yeah, we had those conversations. We were all in agreement of, we want to be generous to each one of the partners if that came up. Just because they're the reasons, all of us are part of the reason we're at that point anyways.
Sure.
So it's in there, but that it wasn't as hard. It was more of like, if somebody does something that can damage the brand, that was the more
right
hard parts, So.
Absolutely. So where you guys wanting to Alta? Am I saying it correctly? So what's the goal for Alta? What does the future look like? Do you guys have I'm sure you do, a 10-year strategic plan or less or longer? I mean, what does that look like for the future of the company?
Yeah, it's interesting because I always have one idea and it somehow always changes every year. And as we grow these things and they get bigger. And so, the thing is we think that with both companies coming together, we can be a lot more balanced in our growth and being able to grow the business the right way, right? A lot of door-to-door companies, they kill it in door-to-door, but they don't have a balance on technician sales or inside sales. And then it's not the best business model, right? And then there's other companies that don't do door-to-door, but they kill it on inside sales and they kill it on technician sales. And so, which is great, but maybe they can't scale as quickly, right? Or maybe they don't have as much density in the routes. And so kind of, using both sides to just build up the strongest company we can. And who knows? I mean, at the end of the day, we're going to grow this thing as big as we can. And, I think I've told you before, private equity is always out there. I don't know what happened, but it seems like pest control became the sexy industry over the last couple of years.
Right.
And so for us, it would always be something, if we look into those opportunities, to make sure it's doing what's best for our employees and to making sure that we're always continuing to be able to grow and give them opportunities to advance and to grow with the company. We're not looking to sell it and leave. We would be growing we're all on board for the next 5 to 8 years anyways. And so that's when we all signed up for this thing. And that's what we kind of looked at and said, hey, we've got a good 5-8 years left and then we'll see what happens, but let's have a good run at it. So.
Absolutely, man. Well, you've touched on a lot of good, nuggets here. You've shared a lot of good nuggets and perspective. As we wrap up this 2-part series, I'd love to come back on this second part and let's talk about your inside sales program and your technician sales. I think those are 2 things that everybody in the industry that is wanting to progress to maybe a newer way of doing pest control, they're anxious to learn about that and get better at that, right? Because it's pest control probably when you started the traditional pest control companies looking a little bit different these days. So if you're good with that, when you join us here for the second part of this series, let's dive into that. And also I'm going to talk about the entrepreneurial side of Preston Peterson, and not just Preston Peterson, but Preston and his wife, because little did I even know that you and your wife also have another business that is scaled pretty dang quick in the last 2 years. So in fact, now I'm starting to see she's the brains behind this whole operation, right?
She makes me look good. She's the one that's really and is amazing. So.
Well, that's awesome. Well, man, I appreciate your time. And guys, please join us for the second part of this series when this continues.